This is Garis Masculist MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 750, ta-da! Entitled How Society Needs to Change, according to the Masculists. This is part 2. Carrying straight on. Masculists, particularly masculist theorists such as myself, are very conscious of the idea that the FIPping of women, the creation of a FIP society, will go a long way in solving most of men's gender issues. That is, the problems men face that are so heavily discussed in the manosphere. That is, men on the internet who talk about men's issues, about MGTOW, in brackets, men going their own way, and masculism, about men's lib. One of the worst gender crimes that women commit against men today is their divorce rape of men in the fluffy, feminist-dominated divorce court system, where one father in 4 gets butchered, losing custody of his kids with a 90% probability in many countries, losing his house to his fluffy ex-wife so that she can raise her kids in it, losing half his wealth and stuff to her, being forced to make payments to his kids, whom he is barely allowed to see, perhaps 2 weekends a month. And if his ex-wife is a real fluffy, he may be forced to pay her alimony for the rest of his life, with no legal nor moral obligation on his ex-wife to get off her fat parasitic ass and FIP up. One father in 4 suffers this fate, this butchery, which is one of the worst gender crimes that fluffy women commit against men. Obviously, once we live in a FIP society, the fluffy feminist-controlled divorce courts, which look upon women as fluffies, can be thoroughly reformed. They can be based upon the principle of financial independence of both divorcing parties. That is, it's assumed that the divorcing mother is a FIP, so that alimony can be thrown out. Custody of the kids can be made joint by default. The halving of wealth and stuff can be thrown out, since women are seen by the divorce courts to be FIPs, who can pay their own way through life. A thorough reform of the divorce courts will certainly help young men become more inclined to be fathers again. At the moment, most upper middle class, university educated young men are conscious of the toxicity of the fluffy feminist controlled divorce courts that the feminists took over in the 70s, so have chosen to live the MGTOW, MGTOW, men going their own way, lifestyle of not marrying, rejecting paternity, and spending their money on themselves. Given the toxicity of the divorce courts for men, this decision by 2/3 of young men in many countries is entirely rational and to be expected. But reforming the divorce courts will also not be enough to satisfy the political demands of the Masculists, who also want the creation of GECs, GECs, gender equality committees in the parliaments that consist half of female feminist politicians and half of male masculist politicians, so that the gender issues of both sexes are dealt with equally, which is far from being the case today, in today's gynocentric society, gender politically speaking, where nearly everyone today is still monoconscious, so is simply unaware how much worse women oppress men. The male half of these GECs will then legislate 2 major gender laws, that is the PARA and the OPTAB, OPTAB. The PARA is the paternity rejection right, that is, giving men the same right to reject an unwanted pregnancy as women have. That could ruin a woman's life. The fact that women have the MARA and men don't have the PARA is the most blatant form of gender discrimination that exists, that makes masculists burn with a sense of gender injustice. The OPTAB is the obligatory paternity testing at birth, for all births, to combat women's horrible gender crime of paternity fraud, in brackets, where a woman lies to her man that the kid growing in her is his when she knows it's not, close brackets, which is one of the most callous of gender crimes that gender criminal women commit against men, that enslaves a man for 2 decades to pay for a kid that is not even his. The Masculist politicians in these GECs will systematically remove laws that are discriminatory towards men, as will the feminist politicians do something similar for women. Even once the GECs have been established, they will probably not be enough to bring the birth rate back to replacement rate. So what more needs to be done? Many individuals today think that they prefer to spend their money on themselves and not raising the next generation. The crash in the birth rate is the greatest of all existential threats to humanity, even worse than a nuclear war or global warming, since with the latter two, humanity will still probably survive. But if the birth rate continues well below the replacement rate, then it's a mathematical certainty that we will wipe ourselves out. So more drastic measures will be needed by governments to force both sexes to have kids. What might be done? I think the whole mentality towards child raising must be changed. And to do that, governments need to go on a publicity campaign and indoctrination campaign to powerfully, morally persuade both sexes to raise kids. A combined carrot and stick approach can be used by governments. As a carrot, those couples who have at least 2 kids get tax benefits and hefty subsidies. The biggest such subsidy would be the maternity wage. That is, for the 6 years that a FIP woman remains at home full-time to raise 2 small children to kindergarten age, that is 4 years of age, she is given by the government a maternity wage equal to what she earned in her career-competent profession before she had kids. Masculists push for the MCT, that's Mother Career Timeline, as outlined above, that would be paid for by the taxes of the whole population. That is, taking the attitude that raising kids is the business of the whole population and not just the burden of couples. In today's world, when a FIP woman wants to be a mother and stays home full-time to raise small children, the total income of the couple halves, which is such a shock that many couples choose either to have only 1 kid or none at all. There's also a more psychological stick approach, and that is to educate / persuade / indoctrinate both sexes that not to have kids makes them life leechers who leech off the sacrifices that their parents made in raising them, that they don't return the favour to the next generation. That is, that they are supremely selfish, who leech off their parents and society, that they are not performing their civic duty to raise the next generation. Governments can really push this message, creating a powerful moral duty to have kids, or be seen as genociders, as vermin, as unfit to live. I believe that the ideas of this flyer, should be read by politicians, since the birth rate crash is increasingly seen as the greatest of all existential crises of our times. Politicians need to learn Masculist ideas if they are to be able to effectively address the population crash. There are many governments today obsessed with the crash in their populations, for example, Russia, China, South Korea, Japan, etc., who are taking all kinds of measures to try to push the birth rate back up, but so far all are failing. The Masculists claim that the main reason for these failures is that these politicians remain ignorant of MGTOW and Masculist ideas, hence do not understand why young men boycott marriage and paternity. These politicians need to become biconscious by learning Masculist ideas so that they have sufficient intellectual tools to tackle effectively the population crash problem. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. In brackets, click on the Masculist tab for 750 plus Masculist essays and their videos. Google the terms London Real and Hugo de Garis to see videos on Masculism at AI will kill 1 billion people dash. Do we create our exterminators? Professor Hugo de Garis dash London Real. In brackets. See the last half hour of this 2-hour interview for the Masculist segment, as well as Countdown to Extinction, How AI Will Exterminate Mankind, again for the last 40 minutes on Masculism. These flyers are available in text and video formats on Minds, BitChute, Odyssey, MGTOW.tv, X and YouTube. I have nearly 1,000 Masculist videos in 15 playlists on YouTube that can be accessed by searching for the channel name De Garis Masculist Videos. That's all one word. All 1,000 of my Masculist videos in one long list in most recent first time order can also be found on X by searching the channel name De Garis Masculist Videos. That's 4 words. Ciao.